Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. So firstly, I would like to sincerely thank you all for inviting me to speak at your regional conference. It's an absolute pleasure and an honour to be here. As Patricia mentioned, I'm here to talk about my personal experiences of domestic violence, but more importantly than that, the abject failings of the systems the country has put in place to supposedly protect us. Not just me, there's countless others. It's a difficult topic. It's difficult, obviously, for me personally, but I feel it has to be discussed and it has to be heard. So my story starts back in 2017 when I met my abuser for the first time. He's a Turkish national. We met over in Turkey. It wasn't a classic Turkish waiter scenario, I have to say. He was well educated, had a good job, been university educated, and he purported himself to be a liberal Muslim. Yes, yes. He appeared kind, considerate, everything you'd want in a future partner. I've since learnt that they call it love bombing, and that's the game they play at the beginning to lure you into their snare. After a brief courtship, we got married in the August of 2018, and by the November of that year, he came to live with me here over in the UK, courtesy of a spouse visa. He'd been in the UK less than a month when his behaviour towards me changed and the mask slipped. What came next was without doubt the worst 4 years of my entire life. It started with a trip to the local pub, and I made the fatal mistake of asking if I could have a Bailey's latte. It wasn't a mistake to most people, it's a personal choice, but seeing as I'd married him, personal choice did not come into it anymore. The punishment phase lasted 5 months. I was emotionally berated, belittled, criticised, all affection was withdrawn. Every interaction was absolutely horrific. I kept my responses minimal so as not to evoke a tirade. Apparently, it's what I deserved for trying to suggest that I could make my own choice what I drank. It was during that phase that I had said to my friend, this is going to end by my murder or my suicide. It felt that bad. Threats to kill became commonplace. And it was all about, as far as he was concerned, maintaining family honour. He ruled and governed by instilling fear. He knew how to get my heart racing, he knew how to cause maximum pain, and then he knew how to make it all better again. The cyclic patterns became normal, and I learnt to live with them as best as I could, but I was habitually reminded that I was one fatal mistake away from the next punishment phase. He morphed at the drop of a hat, and daily life was like playing a game of chess. He never quite knew what the rules were. I'd wake up every morning and think to myself, is today going to be bearable? You could never predict it. A good day was trying to keep him on an even keel, keep the peace, not cause him any distress, and do anything I could to make him happy. But what I didn't realise at the time was that I could and would never win. I would never win that game. Very occasionally we had good days, but the good days were only when the perception was that I'd been following the rules of the moment. The only certainty was that the good days would not last. Aside from the emotional torture, I was controlled to the nth degree. What I ate, how I ate it, the order in which I ate items on my plate, what I wore, how I wore it, whether I dried my hair, painted my nails, how I walked down the road, and even the conditions by which it was permissible to laugh were decided for me. I was not able to go out on my own, apart from going to work. Obviously, I paid the bills. However, even then, I had to promise I would not be alone with a man at any time. Socialising, gardening, washing the car, going out for a walk, banned. I couldn't open my own front door and was told that if I did, that would be enough reason to kill me. My shirt had to be tucked in at all times, and my TV programmes were monitored. I was socially isolated and deprived of everything I held dear. My family, my dog, everything was dictated to me. I loathed myself at that point for not being able to leave. I absolutely loathed myself for the person I'd become. Irritable, bitter, judgmental, and sometimes just plain horrid. An extension of him, his finest work. Aside from the constant psychological torture, I was abused physically as well. He cut my fingernails to the point they bled. He forced me to carry heavy furniture that I couldn't lift. And he scalded my face with a hot chai glass, something which I've had to have considerable skin treatment to try and repair. I was sexually abused too, but I won't go into that. What I've alluded to already, but is relevant to add, is that my ex-husband only secured employment here in the May of 2021. So up until that point, I paid all rental payments, the deposit for our house we bought, all household bills, everything was paid for solely by me, hence why I was allowed to work. So 4 years of emotional, psychological, and financial abuse, neglect, and trauma later, I was an absolute shell of my former self. I absolutely couldn't take it anymore, and so I researched every possible method I could find to try and take my own life. I had a failed suicide attempt in the December of 2021, but thanks to the support of a very close friend of mine, I was finally able to see that I had two choices: leave or die. I chose life and brought up the courage to leave on the 1st of April 2022. I left my home and I went to stay with a friend in Bath. About a week later, I reported my ex-husband to the police, and when I returned to Kent, he was arrested for coercive and controlling behaviour. I naively agreed that he could stay in the house for 2 weeks so that he could collect his belongings and return to Turkey. He was on a spouse visa, so the rules were, as per the Home Office, he would have 60 days in which to leave the country. How wrong I was. I provided the police with absolutely everything they needed. I did video interviews, they had statements, they had a recording of him threatening to kill my mother, witness statements from friends and colleagues, diary notes, counselling notes, emails I'd sent the Samaritans, etc., plus other police records. I was assured that the evidence was strong and that the case would go back to the CPS and that a decision would be made as to whether he'd be charged within a matter of weeks. I heard nothing. I spent 3 months chasing my case officer to see what was happening. Heard nothing. At that point, I thought, well, I'm going to have to now get a solicitor, and needed some assistance in order to try and obtain a non-molestation order and a non-occupation order via the family court so that he would leave the house, because, of course, he was flatly refusing to leave. When I went to the civil court, I was told that, unfortunately, an interim order would not be granted for him to leave the property because his needs were greater than mine. So he earned slightly less than I did. He didn't have any family in the UK, and because I was able to live with my mother, he could stay in the house. Instead, they said it would have to go to a final hearing, the cost of which for me would be about £30,000. I'd already spent about £20,000. I finally received communication from my case officer at the end of August, who agreed to come to the house with me to collect my post. She didn't turn up, so I was forced to go to the house on my own, accompanied by a friend. At that point, my ex-husband decided to make malicious and vexatious accusations and said that I tried to threaten him when I went to the property. And he then put in a non-occupation order against me. So I had to go to court again. I chased the police and chased the police and chased the police to provide me with the evidence I needed to prove to the court that he'd been arrested, he was going to be charged. However, they didn't respond. I didn't get anywhere. So I was forced into a situation where I had to provide an undertaking to the court, effectively banning me from my own house for a period of 12 months. It was either that or go to a final hearing a year later and pay excessive amounts of money I just did not have. My criminal case was finally sent off to the CPS in September 2022, And for the next few months, again, not a lot happened. I repeatedly chased the police and the CPS for a charging decision. What's happening? I needed to know. I was assigned a new case officer in August of last year, August 2023, and quite unbelievably, I was told that there'd been major failings with the initial investigation. Not only could he have been bailed away from my property so that I could go back, he should have been bailed away from the property, but also his phone should have been taken for data extraction. It wasn't. My phone should have been taken. Statements weren't taken properly. And I had to re-sign medical consent forms because apparently the original ones were the wrong ones and were the old version. And as a parting shot, I was informed that the new case officer would effectively have to start investigating the case from scratch all over again, and that would probably take a year more. I'm still waiting. Understandably, I was distraught, deflated, and felt grossly let down by the systems put in place by the police. I spent thousands of pounds trying to remove my ex-husband from my property, and unfortunately, I just seemed to get an oops. My ex-husband's now been under police investigation for 22 months, during which time he's refused to leave my house, he's changed the locks to my house, and I've been living in temporary accommodation. Hindsight what it is, I had no idea that in actual fact, the judicial systems as they stand, the Home Office and the family courts would not be able to protect me and ensure a safe return to my home. Regardless of the fact we're now divorced, apparently he has home rights, and I need to wait for a financial remedy final hearing, which could be another year's time, in order for him to leave. I also will find out how much more money he will extort from me because he thinks he's entitled to 60% equity in the property, despite having contributed nothing. He's also admitted that he came here solely with the intention of trying to extort money, and then he will go back to Turkey. So the post-separation abuse has not stopped, and the judicial system and civil courts, in my view, are perpetuating this. Naturally, I reached out to anyone I could. I reached out to the police and the crime commissioner, who did nothing. I reached out to my local Conservative MP, who also did nothing. As far as I'm concerned, the criminal justice system, the family courts and the Home Office are quite frankly unfit for purpose. I've got lived experience of this. A radical overhaul is needed. Crime must never, ever pay and benefit an individual. Throughout our marriage, my ex-husband gradually expressed extremist views. Of course, not at the beginning. He hates the country that offered him a home, and he made that abundantly clear. He was reported to the Prevent scheme by the police, but even this doesn't seem to have made a difference. And the 60 days has gone on and on and on. I understand he's now got a temporary employment visa, but has applied for indefinite leave to remain. Absurd. I guess, though, if our government cannot manage to deal with illegal immigrants, then how on earth can I expect them to deal with those who arrive here legally and go on to commit crime? So to finish, I would just like to add that the fallback my ex-husband used since marrying me was that in his culture, his treatment of me was permitted. That's likely so. Personal opinion, but I vehemently believe that multiculturalism does not work. It's like mixing oil and water. We must protect our heritage, our British values, our traditions, and our morals. We cannot be taken over by an archaic ideology that permits abuse and torture. We cannot, and we absolutely must not. Come here and live by our laws, respect our culture, or go home. So I thank you, Kip, for welcoming me into the fold, and I very much look forward to what the future of the party has to offer. Thank you very much, and thank you for being kind to me.
That's it.